On this auspicious occasion, I hope to say something of some value. We're celebrating the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement, but actually we're still in the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement. We're just beginning, because 1 second in the life of Brahma is 96,000 of our years. Therefore, when Srila Prabhupada came here in 1965, a mere 50 years ago, is inconceivably short period of time. And Srila Prabhupada, the unique thing is he came here to actually create a revolution. But of course that revolution was not what people consider a revolution in the modern society. It's a revolution of purification of consciousness, to wake us up to our original consciousness. One time when Srila Prabhupada was leaving, well, this is 1967, I believe. He was going back to India, and he was on the west coast of America. He was giving initiation rather liberally at that time. And during that particular occasion, one man asked Srila Prabhupada, "What are you doing for humanity?" And Srila Prabhupada answered that, "Have you benefited from the Hare Krishna movement?" And he said, "Yes." So he said, "That's what I'm doing for humanity." So of course we'd like to take the vision of saving the world. There was a time in our society where we were quite confident that within a very short period of time the judges would be wearing tilak and the President of America would have an initiated name. What's that? Das. The only question is who he's serving. So of course, in our very brief period of time that the Hare Krishna movement has been going on, then sometimes our expectations, sometimes they go up and sometimes they go down. But actually this movement, at least it should change our hearts. As Srila Prabhupada once said, that the Red Cross and other such organizations, they're known to be doing welfare work for humanity. But the highest welfare work is to actually teach people the difference between themselves and their body and their relation with Krishna. But even higher than that, the highest welfare work of all is ultimately to save oneself. So if nothing else comes out of the Hare Krishna movement, at least we should become pure devotees of Krishna. And of course, that is the secret of spreading Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada did not impress. Of course, I didn't join the movement until later, I guess later relatively. I first came in contact with the movement in 1966, and some of my friends were living in the movement in 26 Second Avenue, so they told me what it was about. That was in the beginning of 1968, and I didn't really start chanting Hare Krishna till the middle of 1968. So that was relative. At that time, for my vision, I asked my temple president, Rupanuga Prabhu, how long he was in the movement when I first came, and he said 1.5 years. So I thought that's wow, that's amazing. 1.5 years, I couldn't believe it. Such a senior devotee. No, but and now, of course, 1.5 years is not considered very much, but at that time it was quite significant. And of course, we didn't when I joined in 1968, there were the only books that were available were Srila Prabhupada's original 3 Srimad Bhagavatam, the set of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that was it. And then there was Back to Godhead. There were 6 copies of Back to Godhead. And I don't think there was anything else available. There was our classes 3 times a week at the university, given by only one devotee, Burjan Prabhu, was 1 verse from Bhagavad Gita. Not even from Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. It was from Radha Krishna's Bhagavad Gita. And we had 1 verse, Denosmi nita dehe komaram yovanam jara tata dahantara praptira diryas tatra namuyate. So 3 times a week, that's the only thing I heard for months. It didn't really bother me so much, although, because I didn't know how there was anything more to practically to the philosophy than that. Because we had the Bhagavatam set. When I walked into the temple for the first time for the morning class was rather late back then, but I heard Ashvatthama throwing a Brahmastra at Arjuna. That was my introduction to the Hare Krishna movement. And the whole world was on fire, the whole universe was on fire. In any case, at that time, I remember I saw when I walked into this, our temple was around a quarter of the size of this room here. And there was one picture of Gopal. And I was wondering why they worship this lady. Gopal with the calf. I thought it was a deer. And I thought Gopal was a she. So we didn't know much about Krishna. The day I moved into the temple, then I became the head pujari. And at that time, Burjan and Toshan Krishna Prabhu had left to go to North Carolina to open the temple there. And Burjan, right before he left, I got 2 assignments. One, I became the treasurer and the head pujari. And Burjan, when I first came to the temple, the deities were on this bookshelf. And Burjan worked hard before he left to build some kind of altar. So I asked Burjan, who are they? And he said he didn't know. So I was the head pujari. Of course, we didn't know what a head pujari really meant. There was no standard. We had no artis. We had something called bells. We take a bell and ring it and then offer a stick of incense because that's the only thing people knew. Obviously, our understanding of Krishna, what to speak of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there was an introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, life and sketch of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but believe it or not, the devotees weren't big readers. I remember I was sitting there in in our center. Our center was an abandoned railroad shack. And the floor just this is, you walk into the temple and then you went gradually down and up. The floor was broken. And then they were leveled out right before you got to the kitchen. And we had the altar. So it wasn't and then the second floor we had three rooms, and the brahmacharis, all 3 of us, lived in one room, and another room was for some books. So at that time we knew very little about Krishna, and no one really, we were college students. I was a college student. I went to college as a devotee. There wasn't a lot of time to read, nor could we were very much necessarily inclined. the devotees used to read the Back to Godhead magazines. But these original 3 Srimad Bhagavatams were rather not so easy to read, actually. So all we really knew is, I remember I was reading Srimad Bhagavatam one day. My former roommate, who also came to the temple, he looked at me and started chastising me. Why are you wasting your time reading these books? So I had to get up at night when everyone was asleep to read, so I didn't get chastised. In any case, the only thing we really knew at that time was Srila Prabhupada, who was Swamiji at that time. And there wasn't a lot of information, but because, of course, our temple president, he came from New York, and therefore he had joined at 26 Second Avenue. And so the main talk was what Srila Prabhupada was doing, where he was, and that was like the center of the movement. As a matter of fact, I even got initiated before I even saw Srila Prabhupada. At that time we'd get initiated by mail. And I sent my letter to Srila Prabhupada and asking for initiation. And Srila Prabhupada looked at the letter and he said, well, that's all right. He said, but there's no letter of recommendation. So how can I initiate this boy? So Devananda, who was there in Los Angeles at that time, said, I guess we can say, Swamiji, I just talked to him on telephone. I don't know why I talked to him on the telephone, but he seemed like a nice boy. So Srila Prabhupada said, oh, you recommend him? He said, but Swamiji, I just talked to him for a minute. He said, Prabhupada said, so if you think he's a nice boy, then I'll give him initiation. And, of course, we wonder how Prabhupada was able to accomplish what he did in such a brief period of time. And we wonder how we're going to be able to accomplish, in the very brief period of time that we have left, anything of real significance. What's amazing is that Srila Prabhupada took people who were more or less barbarians. Even the barbarians in previous times would have a hard time relating to them, because even the barbarians didn't break all the principles all the time. They were a little bit more cultured. So Prabhupada, the amazing thing is that Prabhupada took barbarians and made them into human beings and actually engaged them in devotional activities. So the question is how we're actually going to go further and actually make some impact on this world. As we can see, although we have some relative success in the world in terms of, we can say we have 600 temples, some of them are quite small temples, some of them practically have no devotees in them. They have more deities than devotees. Therefore, the question is how we're actually going to save the world. Well, how did Prabhupada actually introduce the movement? For one thing, he had an advantage over most of us, is that he is a pure devotee, so that helps a lot. As Vidura told Maharaj Yudhisthira, Maharaj Yudhisthira told Vidura when he came back after pilgrimage, he said, Bhavan vidas bhagavatas tirtha bhutak swayam vibho tirtha koravanti tirthani swantak stena kathabritaha. That saints like yourself, they're verily places of pilgrimage. Because wherever you go, you're able to turn that place into a place of pilgrimage because you carry the Lord within your heart. So that was my experience, and I'm sure whatever experience any of us have, it didn't depend upon Prabhupada's expertise, and Prabhupada was quite expert in many things. He was expert at playing the mridanga. I remember seeing him, first time I ever saw him play the mridanga was when he came to Buffalo in 1969, and at an engagement he played the mridanga, and I was just like, amazed at how his hands would move. And he was expert at cooking, he was expert at singing, he was expert at so many things. But then there are so many people who are expert at so many things. But what Srila Prabhupada was expert was about being a servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, and therefore being able to carry within his heart, wherever he went, the whole disciple succession, the 6 Goswamis, the Panchatattva, and Krishna and his activities in Vrindavan, plus all the incarnations, etc. So that's a pretty big heart. One time, Srila Prabhupada became very disturbed in 1974. And at that time, we were all invited to, all the temple presidents, to come to open the Krishna Balaram temple, for the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple. I believe it was supposed to be in 1974. And I had just been to India previously for one of the Gaura Purnim festivals in 74. And Prabhupada said it was almost ready, because Guru Das, at that time Maharaj, was telling Prabhupada that everything's ready, just come, we'll have the opening I guess that would have been in October, etc. Prabhupada invited many dignitaries, I think including the Prime Minister of India, to come for the opening ceremony. Prabhupada just came to Vrindavan to check, to see how everything had progressed, and Prabhupada came to a construction site. Probably much the same construction site that I had seen a few months earlier, which was really a dusty construction site. There was no walls in the temple. The only thing was a little bit present was Prabhupada's room, was sometimes something appearance of it. So Prabhupada just blew up, just like the devastation of the universe, annihilation. And Prabhupada just was on fire, because he had invited practically all the whatever temple presidents there were around the world, so many dignitaries, to come to this opening, and there was no question of opening it that year. And wherever Prabhupada would look, the devotees were hiding because they were afraid of Prabhupada's fiery glances. Prabhupada sat in his room after that, his quarters, which were also under construction, and the devotees were afraid to go in and say anything to him. But one devotee ventured in, and Prabhupada was completely calm and peaceful. Generally, after if we ourselves become so angry, which I hope we don't become so angry, nor can we duplicate Prabhupada's anger. One time, as Navi-Yogendra Maharaj says, he was sitting there in Mayapur one year, and Prabhupada rang his bell, which was Prabhupada in his quarters. Prabhupada rang his bell, and there was no answer. So Prabhupada said, go and look for the guard. So Navi-Yogendra Maharaj found the guard, and Prabhupada started to chastise the guard. And the devotee would start to shake and quiver. His whole body was quivering. And even Navi-Yogendra Maharaj said, my body was quivering too and shaking. Prabhupada's his anger was so penetrating. In any case, Prabhupada was completely calm and peaceful, because Prabhupada gave the example, on the surface of the ocean, there may be a hurricane, there may be so many different whirlpools going on, so many fish are surfacing, making a disturbance, so many boats are riding on the waves, but deep down inside the ocean, everything is quite peaceful. One who has actually reached the platform of surrender, completely engaged in Krishna's service in every respect, then they're actually not living in this world. They're living in Goloka Vrindavan or Vaikuntha. Srila Prabhupada was such a personality, and that was principally the reason why he was able to spread Krishna consciousness, because he was a perfect instrument for Krishna. not only he was present, but as I said, he was empowered by the whole disciple succession, and they were all present with him, including Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his pastimes, and the 6 Goswamis, and Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. As Advaita Acharya said to Lord Chaitanya, that wherever you go, that is Vrindavan. That sweetness of Vrindavan, that expertise and elegance of Vrindavan is what Srila Prabhupada took with him. And therefore, when we hear the stories then about the different pastimes of Srila Prabhupada, that is very significant. But what was the 5 rasas, 7 the direct rasas, 7 indirect rasas? They were all accompanying Srila Prabhupada. And therefore Prabhupada was not just like some detached sadhu from India or some mystical person. He was able to display all the different emotions and rasas in such a way as to attract people to come to Krishna. And Prabhupada knew exactly, he was perfectly aware of how to do that. From my little experience with Srila Prabhupada, I remember one time I was going on an engagement with Srila Prabhupada. My mood was complete. I mean, it was, I don't know why. Maybe it was because of my experiences I had with Srila Prabhupada. But I don't think I was ever more reverential to anyone than I was with Srila Prabhupada. I remember one time I went on an engagement with him in '69 to a university, and he was in one car, I was in another car, and every time I saw Srila Prabhupada, I paid my obeisances, because the cars would catch up. And so Prabhupada was watching the whole thing, and the devotees told me he was chuckling the whole time, watching me pay obeisances. So I was quite in reverence of Srila Prabhupada. As a matter of fact, whenever I saw Srila Prabhupada, like I saw him in New Vrindavan in '69, what was New Vrindavan at that time, and myself and a devotee named, at that time his name was Bhakta Bill, who later on became Bhagavan Das. And Bhakta Bill and myself went up. Bhakta Bill was quite communicative with Srila Prabhupada, but I was sitting there. I don't know if I said anything. Prabhupada just gleamed at us. He was just like effulgent. And he asked us, he said, "So how you like our jungle?" Which was New Vrindavan. But I was sitting there thinking about Subhadra Devi, taking shelter of her because I didn't want to make a mistake. But that was more or less my relation with Srila Prabhupada. So I remember I was going on an engagement one time with Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada walked up to me and just smiled. He said, "Oh, good morning, how are you doing?" And every time I saw Srila Prabhupada and asked him a question, I'd always get a very sarcastic answer. It was almost like he was my alter ego or something. And he was always trying, somehow or another, either he was trying to put me at ease, or he was trying to, and sometimes he would actually give me some very intelligent instructions. But the point is that not only with myself, but everyone I saw that Srila Prabhupada dealt with, he was able to reciprocate perfectly. One time some ladies came from this center for mysticism, silent meditation. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting in his room, and someone invited the ladies to go and speak to Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada sat there for a half an hour, and the ladies sat there for a half an hour, and they didn't say anything, and Prabhupada didn't say anything. And they walked out of the room and said, "Wow, that was the most amazing experience we ever had." As we can see with Sally Agarwal, I was just reading this Back to Godhead magazine from 1967. Prabhupada just knew how to fit in perfectly. He walked off the boat, and the traveler's aide gave him a ticket to go to Pennsylvania. Now, Prabhupada's understanding of America was quite different when he saw it. I believe he said, "Why did you bring me to this hellish place?" They also asked Prabhupada one time, he said, "What is hell like?" when he was in London here. And as we all know what his answer was. So that's how he also saw New York and Boston, which was, even I was a resident of New York, I thought it was hell, even when I was living there. To go to New York, to me I was living in Brooklyn, to me to go to New York was like going to hell, even before I became a devotee. So what to speak of someone from India? But Prabhupada got off the boat and came to Pennsylvania, and he more or less didn't try to convert everyone. Prabhupada was Atmarama. He was completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and he knew exactly where people were at. One time I remember, we can't imagine how conscious Srila Prabhupada actually is very, well, unless we're on that same level of consciousness, how can we actually understand? Even now, Srila Prabhupada is present. We may think Prabhupada is, this is a deity form, but actually this is Srila Prabhupada, and he's just as present as he was when he was here during his manifest pastimes. One time in Boston in 1969, we were waiting for Srila Prabhupada to come up the stairs because they had just gotten this Boston temple, which was the headquarters now for at that time, the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Prabhupada walked up the steps, and remember right before Prabhupada walked up the steps, there was a picture of Lord Chaitanya which was hanging on the top of the steps. And the arms are out. They're still in the Boston Temple the last time I was there. And behind him is some Sankirtan party. And it began to glow. I didn't know why Lord Chaitanya was glowing at that particular moment until I saw Srila Prabhupada step up the steps. And then as soon as Prabhupada came up, the whole room became Vaikuntha. Literally, I didn't even know I was in anxiety until Prabhupada came up, and then there was no anxiety. That's how I knew I was in Vaikuntha. Prabhupada sat on his Vyasasan and took one look at me, and he could actually see who I was as a spiritual soul. I saw he was fully conscious. And that was my experience. I didn't always have that kind of experience, but I always saw that Prabhupada was not. I knew he was talking to Krishna all the time, whenever I saw him. So Prabhupada was perfectly aware of what was going on. Therefore, he knew how to reciprocate. But he was not only just aware, but he was also lovingly aware. For him, everything was non-different from Krishna, simultaneously one and different. And because he was part of the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as directed by his spiritual master, therefore his mission was to make everyone Krishna conscious. And he did that in the most discriminative, the most expert way. Not only when he met people, but Prabhupada was completely aware, because he's in contact with the Super Soul, how to reciprocate in every way with everyone to help them become Krishna conscious. Even the letters that Prabhupada wrote to me, even at that time I could realize that Srila Prabhupada knew exactly what my heart was. As I've said before, one time I wrote to Prabhupada, because I would stay up late at night, because my temple president told me there was a book I shouldn't read. It's called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But because we didn't have much choice of books, it was either the Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam or this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which I wasn't supposed to read. So that was the first book I wanted to read. So when everyone was asleep, I would stay up at night and read it. So at that time, my understanding was that I was practically on the stage of bhava, So I wrote to Srila Prabhupada, along with, because I was the treasurer, I'd send him a check whenever we distributed a Back to Godhead Bhagavad Gita. At this time we got the little blue Bhagavad Gitas. Whenever we distributed them, I'd send the money to Srila Prabhupada for his book fund. So I wrote to Srila Prabhupada and I asked him a question. So I said, how does bhava turn into prema? Because I read about the symptoms of bhava and the symptoms of prema. So Prabhupada wrote me a letter back about preaching, about how we should go out and Harinam every day, which we were doing, distribute Bhagavad Gitas, and how the boys and girls in your country are good souls. That's why they've... and if they simply take this chanting, this Hare Krishna movement, then that will make their lives perfect. In New York, in just 2 weeks, we distributed 3,000 Back to Godheads. And I've heard that in Buffalo, you're also distributing Back to Godhead very nicely. So please continue in this way, and your success in life is assured. As Krishna sees you're working seriously to help bring his other children back to the spiritual kingdom, then he'll bestow all his blessings upon you. That Krishna is never ungrateful for our efforts to serve him, rest assured. And at the end of the letter, P.S., you said you've enclosed $50 for my book fund, but I don't find it here. And as far as the question, how does Bhakti Shakti turn into prema, there's no need to trouble yourself over such advanced topics as the present time. Sometime later, my book, The Nectar of Devotion, will come out, and you can read about it in there. In other words, from my point of view, Prabhupada was able to perfectly understand people's hearts and inspire them by his own being, by his blissfulness, by his loving exchanges, by his gravity, by his qualities, to actually take it seriously and actually do something in Krishna consciousness. It wasn't the buildings, because obviously, at least I didn't join the Hare Krishna movement to move into that particular building. And then I wound up, the next place I lived after that particular building was in a park in Miami Beach, Florida, trying to open a temple, living in a park for some time. We didn't join it for the luxurious apartments, or we didn't join it for the wonderful philosophy, because it was very difficult to understand what the philosophy was. But we joined it because, well, for different reasons. Some of us may have joined because of previous experience in Krishna consciousness, or there may be different reasons. But there was complete faith in Srila Prabhupada at that time. Although faith in each other was not at an all-time high at different times. But faith in Srila Prabhupada was there, not because of advertisement, but because Prabhupada actually deserved that faith. And he was able to reciprocate with each devotee in such a way as to actually inspire that faith. If we look at the Prabhupada, those movies from the early 1966, we can see that the devotees, they may not have known very much about Krishna. They may not have known very much about even the process of Krishna consciousness. There's no arti, for instance. Although I was a head pujari, I didn't find out about arti until sometime in the middle of 1969, when our temple president called up Brahmananda. He explained to him what we were doing, something called arti. So arti at that time, as I said, first all we were doing was bells, but then we added water and a handkerchief and a flower. But no one told me how long we were supposed to do the arti for. So I thought it was like unlimited. You do it for the whole day. Because we did go on book Harinam and book distribution. So the first arti I think I did was for 2.5 to 3 hours. Because we had no instructions. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know things like before you did the arti, you were supposed to take a bath before you served the deities. It wasn't until Srila Prabhupada came to Buffalo that year, and I was in his room, and Purushottam brought in a tray, arti tray. Prabhupada looked at the arti tray and said, "It's dirty, go and wash it." I said, "Oh, you're supposed to wash it." Then I thought, "Oh, you're supposed to wash the arti tray." I learn something new every day. And one of my experience with Prabhupada was always showing me things and asking me what I thought about them. And I didn't at that time I needed glasses for some reason. So Prabhupada showed me his deities and said, "Well, what do you think of my deities?" I couldn't see them very clearly, but I figured they must be very nice. So, "Oh, they're very nice, Prabhupada." So we didn't know very much, but we knew that Prabhupada was a pure devotee, that he was a pure devotee of Krishna, and therefore, on that basis, we were able to do anything practically. Of course, we didn't know what we were, if we explained to what we did back then, it seems quite extraordinary. But it wasn't that we were thinking, "Oh, let's do something extraordinary." I remember I had a hitchhike from that particular place in Florida where we were living, which was not a big attachment on my part, since living in a park was not my ideal of luxury, especially since at that time a hurricane came by the park and we were living outside in the hurricane. So that was rather uncomfortable, to tell you the truth. If you've ever been in a hurricane outside, it was quite wet, cold. And at that time we were only eating we had 3 devotees doing our program. There was Prahladananda Swami at that time, his assistant, his name was Gopinath, and myself. And we lived in the park, we slept in a sleeping bag, and our meal at that time was, because Gargamuni, or known at that time as Gargamuni, he didn't want to spend any money. He was the first one to teach me how to become a treasurer. And his Prabhupada told him, he gave him the only instruction Gargamuni could remember at that time was, you take in the money, but you don't give anything out. So Gargamuni Maharaj at that time, he didn't want to spend even practically a dime on prasadam, which is rather inconvenient when you're a brahmachari and hungry all the time. So his idea is we'd spend the whole morning, we'd cook on the grills in the park, along with the other people cooking other things. Gopinath and myself would make chapatis, and Gargamuni Maharaj would make chutney, apple chutney. And then we'd have a little kirtan at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, depending on when we were done. And the hippies would gather around. And our idea of prasadam distribution was, you put a little of the apple chutney in the chapati, roll it up, and distribute it. And then at the end, after everything was done, then our daily quota of prasadam was 2 chapatis a day. So that was if you did that for 1 or 2 days, what we were doing for weeks. So I was but after a while I get used to it. But we didn't complain, because we had no standard. We didn't know that there was no other thing to compare it against. We just thought it was normal. This is what you do when you're spreading the Hare Krishna movement. Of course, Gargamuni did give us one allowance. He gave us 2 allowances. We could go around the park and look for remnants from the hippies, which is rare. And then we would go on book distribution, and if we got back before a certain time, then we were allowed 1/4 of a cup of sour cream and 2 bananas. But that was not every day. That was only once in a while. And then they told me, when Sridham came with his van, he outranked everyone because he had a van and a wife. So he was going to become the temple president. Of course, I was tolerating it because I thought I was going to become a temple president also. And at that time, being a temple president was the topmost position in our society. So I said, yeah, I'm going to be a temple president, control the whole temple, I'm going to be the master of the park. So Sridham came with a wife and a van, so he outranked me, so I was useless there. So they told me to go and join Vishnu Jan Maharaj in Houston, Texas. He had just gone there with a devotee named Srinath. He had actually gone from Miami before, and he had hitchhiked there. So I had a hitchhike there because we had no money. The only thing I had was a sleeping bag and 2 sets of clothes. And I said, how am I going to get there? So, you hitchhike from Florida. At that time, hitchhiking from Florida was not exactly a luxury either, because it was the deep south of America, and unusual movements were not very popular back then. Matter of fact, they never saw anything unpopular, because nothing lived that was unpopular. Nothing could survive. Those are the times when the Ku Klux Klan was more or less predominating the southern part of America. So I had to hitchhike through the southern part of America. And I met some interesting people, including the police. And they found me quite interesting also. Luckily, they had put Vishnu Jan Maharaj and Srinath in jail for a while when they went through, but I guess they got used to it because they let me go through without arresting me. Of course, I remember one time I had to wait. I was trying to hitchhike to go to Houston. I was walking for 5 or 6 hours because no one would pick me up. Because I guess people, if they saw an alien, they probably call the police, but they were just like too shocked when they saw some person walking down the street with robes on, trying to hitchhike. And finally, some people picked me up. They thought I was a Buddhist, and they were going to a Buddhist temple in Houston, so I was lucky. So to go through that seems rather extraordinary. Now, I guess it would seem extraordinary, I don't know. Besides the fact that I had absolutely nothing to eat during my whole time, except Garga Muni had, out of his kindness, Garga Muni Maharaj, he decided to buy me 1/4 pound of fried chickpeas to take with me. And the person at the health food store gave me 2 date balls to take with me. So that was quite a feast, the 2 date balls. But I looked at the chickpeas, I couldn't bear to eat them. In any case, it wasn't so extraordinary because we had nothing to compare it to. It was just what we did. Nowadays, I don't know if I would do the same thing. I probably would have tried to go out and collect a little bit more to get my bus fare. But we did it because we had faith in Krishna to some extent, but more than that, because that's what Prabhupada told us to do. So that same faith in Prabhupada has to be there also now. We have to develop the same faith, because even we have some gurus initiating and instructing gurus now, they have to have absolute faith in Prabhupada, and we have to develop the same faith in the instructions coming down in disciple succession. So that ultimately Krishna, Lord Chaitanya and his associates, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, the 6 Goswami and their associates, they appear within our heart so that we become Krishna conscious, and then it will be possible to distribute Krishna consciousness to others. Of course, we can distribute Srila Prabhupada's books, we can distribute the prasadam, we can distribute so many things, but until we actually become conscious of Krishna, we ourselves don't take it so seriously, nor will other people take it as seriously as we'd like them to take it. So that the actual revolution that Srila Prabhupada talked about, the cultural revolution, to bring about to help people, this misdirected society that is talked about in the Bhagavatam, can actually be achieved. Now Srila Prabhupada, because he was such a personality who had complete faith in his guru and his instructions, therefore Krishna appeared, along with all his expansions. So that's what we have to develop also. It is not by buildings One time Srila Prabhupada wrote to me, he said, I don't want buildings, I don't want money, I don't want any of these things. I just want to see that my books are being distributed, and because you're doing this, I am pleased. But it's not that we don't want buildings. It's not that we don't want money. Prabhupada wanted all these things. As a matter of fact, he wrote me a letter about that too also, about why he wanted me to try and find a building somewhere. But he wanted the buildings to be filled with Krishna-conscious devotees. As he explained to me in one letter, he said that the reason why we're trying to get a building is that I could sit on, Bhaktivedanta Swami could sit underneath the tree and no one will come. But if we're in a very nice building, so many people will come. And then they can hear about Krishna. And if they hear about Krishna from those who actually have faith in Krishna, then the result is that they'll follow the instructions, and the result is that they'll gradually become conscious of Krishna. So that's our movement. Srila Prabhupada was a loving servant of our disciple succession, and therefore they also came. They were also with Srila Prabhupada, giving their love along with Srila Prabhupada's love. So we also have to do that, and then our Krishna consciousness movement will be successful. Hear about Krishna through Srila Prabhupada's instructions, follow his example, be willing to make some sacrifice for the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Tell everyone we meet, our friends, our relatives, whatever, try to help everyone, even our husband or wife, at every moment, try to make that meaningful exchange based upon trying to help them become Krishna conscious. If we really want to love our children, if we really want to love our husband or wife or our friends or anyone else, then we have to meditate upon trying to help them become conscious of Krishna. And when Krishna, as much as he appears within our heart, as much as our acharyas appear within our heart, then as much as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's and associates appear within our heart, then we'll feel some love, and they'll feel some love also. But without that, there is no question of love, there's no question of real relationships, there's only a question of trying to look for those relationships that are found in the instructions of Srila Prabhupada has given us and by his example. So, I'll stop there. Thank you.